Hey, this is Dirk Nowitzki, and you listen to the Mavs Step Back podcast.
Rep the Mavs, step back, overcame the setbacks, starting where we left at. No, we gotta get back, no, we gotta get back. Rep the Mavs, step back, overcame the setbacks, starting where we left at. No, we gotta get back, like no, we gotta get back. Let me step back for a minute. Let me step back for a minute. Let me step back for a minute. Let me step back for a minute.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Mavs Step Back podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Trigg, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and DallasBasketball.com colleague, Matt Galatzan. And today, less than 24 hours before the NBA trade deadline, we have Dallas Mavericks general manager Donnie Nelson with us. Donnie, how you doing today, man?
Dalton and Matt, always a pleasure.
Yeah, we always enjoy it when you get to come on and talk with us, and it's a busy time for you right now and for the Mavs. And one thing that everybody is wanting to know, and I'm sure you've been asked about it a lot, but the trade deadline, it is less than 24 hours away. Everybody's wondering what the Mavs are going to do during that time. You've been on this podcast before, and you've told us that trade season is like a fireman's existence. How often has that bell been ringing the last couple of days? Has it picked up?
Well, it always rings. It's nonstop. It's just 30 teams trying to either get better or prepare for life in the lottery. So there's always communication activity. How much of that transacts into a deal remains to be seen. But the bottom line is we really like this young group. We want to give them a chance to. We think they've earned the right to see what they can do here. We're definitely trending in the right direction. Our last two mini series started out with losses, and we rebounded well. And so we're coming together at the right time. And for us to do something, it's going to have to be for really good reason.
Yeah, that's what Mark told us. He came on the pod about a week and a half ago. And that's what he was telling us too, unless y'all were just blown away by something, if it was like a star player that, a team was just trying to move on from, a guy looking for a new situation, or, a team just looking to get rid of some good players to get off of money. He basically told us to not get our hopes up too much. So.
Yeah. So Donnie, you mentioned the team had been playing really well lately, and it really, since that Golden State game, it's been a complete turnaround. It's felt like a totally different team. What do you think the secret has been behind that turnaround?
I think it's health. I think it's players playing better, and it's chemistry. I think those are the main ingredients. And again, a lot of these guys haven't had a chance to, with COVID and lack of practice and, being in the isolation tank, a lot of these guys just haven't shared a lot of, quote unquote court time. So I think it's a combination of all those things.
And, with the trade deadline coming up and the team playing so well, it's a difficult time to try to, balance all of this stuff. Obviously you want to get better, but not at the expense of disrupting things. So we won't get into specific players or anything like that, or anything like that. But if you guys were to make some sort of move, is there a certain type of player that you see this team could potentially need, or is there nothing really that you see that stands out to you?
Oh, good question, Matt. I think if you look at all things, Luka, shooting always has its place. We want to be able to give him the freedom and open up, the court for him to, as Mark Followell will say, work his Luka magic. I think rangy, athletic defenders always will have their place in Rick's system. with Luka, being the size that he is, he, we can switch, 1, 2, 3, sometimes even 4, with, those lengthy, athletic, defensive minded 2s and 3s. And so that will always have its place. And then, I think you saw in the Portland series a little bit, Cantor was able to throw his weight around some until, Boban kind of came to the rescue. And so I think, to shot blocking will always have its place in our defensive schemes. But maybe, maybe an eye on a little bit of fortification of our center bullpen, maybe maybe in a different look, in a different way. That's another thing we have an eye on. None of which you should, look for us to, tamper with really kind of our rotational type guys. We really want to give these guys a chance to come together and grow together.
Yeah, I know. As much as KP is capable of on the defensive end and the offensive end, but especially the defensive end, that's what helps out the most, in my opinion. It would be nice to, if something came up to where you could, add a guy into the rotation, but that could kind of help him kind of lessen his load a little bit. So that would be good. Donnie, like I said, we had Mark on our pod recently, and the way he put it, he said unless it was for a game-changing star, that was his words, that you guys were unlikely to do much. So my question is, what do you personally consider a player who is a game-changing star, over-the-top player? Does it have to be like a really big-name guy, or could it be a guy who, maybe his name doesn't blow you away, but he makes a critical area of your team substantially better by doing the little things?
Well, I think Mark's, really a game-changing star would be something that we would consider with our, let's call it rotational guys. If there was some player that could, ensure us into the second round, or get us, solidly planted in the top 6, those are things that you always look at, measure, and if the opportunity presents itself, you pull the trigger. I think
Right.
that, like I said, our if you're looking at, the rotational guys, I wouldn't look for much to happen there. Maybe around the edges is maybe where there's an opportunity to, add a shooter, a shot blocker, or, a wing defender, or maybe upgrade a little bit. Those things, those conversations are always had this time of year.
So Donnie, obviously Mark also mentioned that, you guys had some untouchable players, and obviously Luka and KP are about as untouchable as it gets right now. My question is, how do you go through the process of evaluating a trade offer in terms of the other guys on your roster that you might not view as untouchable, but you still feel are really key parts of your team? Like, how do you weigh whether or not that trade is if the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak?
Well, I think everything, again, it starts with, our, young building blocks, and how does it augment, how does it support, how does it bring out the best in those, young players? Is it a, let's call it a solidification of, the third best kind of star type quality guy? Can we trade, two Bs or three Bs for an A or an A plus? Those are the kind of things that, every GM, discusses and talks about. Look, there's no such thing as a untradeable player unless it's, worked into his contract. I mean, everyone's in this business, has got their price. I mean, if some, if Jordan was on the market, everyone would be, in his heyday, everyone would be back the truck up, right? So there's no such thing unless it's a contractual deal. Now, that being said, there's some guys that are as close to it because of what they mean to the team and the city, a la Dirk. There were lots of opportunities for in the day Dirk to leave Dallas. He didn't, and we had no shortage of phone calls on Dirk, and we just politely said no. He's we're going to keep this icon and build him into the tapestry and the history of the Mavericks and the city of Dallas and the Metroplex. So, but you know who those guys are. You've already mentioned them.
Yeah, and obviously there's different parts of a trade as well. There's expiring contracts, there's draft picks, and when you have a guy who's on a big expiring contract that could, it could help. It could, in our opinion, there's three different ways it could help you. The player could, he can help you on the court. You could utilize that cap space in the summer, or you could use that contract in trade talks with teams who might be looking to shed another long-term salary. How much do you take into account the future cap room for next offseason's free agency when attempting to make moves at the trade deadline in terms of staying flexible?
Oh, so those are front and center because, again, that every dollar is precious. And so that's a big factor in everything that we do. I think, Luka's going to kind of take us into a new age. There's so many guys that I think free agents that, see him being, Jason Kidd and Steve Nash combination in a 6'7" frame and fun to play with, and the upside of the team and the market of, the Metroplex and Texas and tax-free and warm weather and all those things. And so I think that, even though we've taken our knocks in the past, I think that we're going to be in a different position, moving forward.
Donnie, I'm going to kind of go off script here for a second because what you said a little bit earlier about Dirk kind of perked my ears up a little bit. And I know that, there's no way you guys would ever trade Luka. It's not even a question, but I have to know. I'm curious. Have you gotten calls about Luka where it's just like, you're probably respectful, but it's kind of like one of those situations where you just kind of hang up the phone pretty quick?
No, look, there's, no, you're always respectful, right? And no offer is a bad offer. It's just this simply saying, hey, it's not a fit. Thank you. No, thanks. We've gotten some surprising calls in the past. I think, pretty much everyone knows that the status of, our guys. And look, I'm not comparing, Luka, KP, or anyone else for that matter to the great one. I mean, all these guys have a long way to go. Just kind of making the case that when you have a really special young talent, you really want to, keep those guys around playing together. And we feel we kind of have a nucleus that we'd like to, barring a miracle or barring a great deal, keep together.
Donnie, Dalton and I are kind of famous among the Mavs Twitterverse, which is obviously a very small community, for our view on the salary cap, in the sense that, we think cap space is a bit overrated and it doesn't actually matter in terms of acquiring players through free agency. Meaning that, basically if a player wants to come to Dallas, you guys are going to find a way to make it happen if you want that guy, despite not necessarily having that cap space available on paper. So whether it be via sign and trade or whatever the case may be. So I guess my question to you is, are we nuts for thinking that?
No, not at all. I think it depends on a number of moving targets. If you look at, let's say the Lakers, for example, all right, or the Clippers, or teams that are legitimately knocking on the championship door, right? Brooklyn. Those are the teams that are going to rich get richer, win the lion's share of, the guys that get bought out, because no one wants to be on the list of, oh, great player, but never won a championship. So you're always going to have, the guys, the names that are getting kicked around now. And that the names of those teams frequently come up for those veterans because they have the best chance to win. And so, yes, you get teams like that get great deals when it comes to, guys will sign a veteran minimum versus making, $5 or $6 million someplace else because they have a chance to get a ring. So you factor in the success of the team. The other thing you factor in is the market. There's boon markets that you want to save up for, and there's markets when you want to keep your powder dry, right? And so you're looking at the names on the list, and you're looking at the other factor is how much money is in the marketplace. There's more money than names this summer, so I think you'll see probably some guys get overpaid. You have to balance that with COVID and everyone going through this belt tightening. But I do think that the first call it 3 to 5 guys in next year's free agency, there'll probably be a bidding war and the price will probably go up, and then there'll be a settling down period. You just have to speak. You have to shop intelligently. And then the other thing is you're balancing all of that with your existing roster and the chemistry. And, is a change, is the change that you make now or in the summer, is it going to have an impact on the chemistry in your locker room? Coach integrating someone, is that going to cost you, in this trade deadline, 2 or 3 games going into the playoffs? There's just so many things that go into those decisions based on where your team is in terms of, positioning for playoffs, win losses, and then measuring all of that against the how your team is performing in the here and now.
Yeah. And look, we understand why there would be some hesitance, to doing something that would really potentially mess up chemistry because, and look, this will be the last thing we'll get you out of here, Donnie, but the team was 9-14 early on in the season and things were looking pretty grim. And, you had the stuff with COVID going on and KP just coming back and trying to get into a groove. And, now the Mavs are 22-19 and a win tonight versus Minnesota and a Spurs loss. They're playing the Clippers. So a Mavs win and a Spurs loss tonight puts the Mavs in the 7th seed. So the team's hitting on all cylinders, and I just want to get your thoughts on, how optimistic are you about the second half of this season, given that 1, the guys have already seemed to turn things around, and 2, the remaining schedule isn't nearly what it was in the first half of the season?
Oh, we're definitely optimistic. How optimistic? It depends. Are we going to play like we did the last game in Portland or the game before?
Right.
It all depends on performance. The exciting part is Luka's KPs and a lot of our young guys ceiling, Brunson, and you can go on and on. Some of these guys' ceilings, we got another couple floors to go, so that's the exciting thing for us internally is watching our guys get better and get better together. And there's no question that every game is critical, and we want to avoid 7 and 8, and 1 through 4 would be great.
Yeah. I know one thing, it would have been nice to have Jalen Brunson in the bubble last year. That's for sure, especially how he's been
Amen.
playing. But Donnie, look, we always appreciate you coming on here and talking with us. We know you're a really busy guy, so we appreciate you giving us some time. So go out there and do your thing, man. We'll see what happens in these next 18 hours or so.
Appreciate the time. Always a pleasure.
All right. You have
Thanks,
a good
Donnie.
one, man. We'll see you next time.
Bye now.
All right, guys. Again, that was Mavs general manager Donnie Nelson. Always a good time when he comes on here and talks with us. Matt, it was really interesting, and like I said, it's not long until the trade deadline. The Mavs, they haven't done anything yet. I mean, really, nobody's done anything yet. But I think it's interesting that there was a little bit more optimism from Donnie, whereas Mark, he pretty much said that they weren't going to do anything at the trade deadline unless it was for a star. Where Donnie, he was more open to, well, if we can upgrade around the edges, so to speak, they would be open to doing that. So that was a hopeful sign for me. I mean, obviously they're working the phones. If they can't get something done, it's not like they're not trying. Now, if they can't get something done because people don't want the assets they have, then you have the question of, well, how did these last couple of off seasons affect that? Then that's when you can get into the front office stuff. But in this specific moment, I don't think people can say, well, the Mavs just aren't doing anything, even though they're happy overall with the team, given all the COVID stuff that they went through, because they have been playing better, Matt. They've been inconsistent at times, but it's night and day difference from what we saw when they lost, what was it, 6-7 straight games. So you can't really blame them for being optimistic there. And then you have the Lakers, who are dealing with injuries. They're going to probably plummet down the standings. They're only, let me see here. I pulled up the standings. Like I said, a win tonight, a Spurs loss, the Mavs will be the 7 seed. And they would only be 4 games behind the Lakers for a top 4 seed in the West. And given the schedule that's that's going the rest of the way, I mean, that's pretty good, man. I'm pretty optimistic about it. But anyway, what's your initial thoughts on, what the Mavs might potentially do before tomorrow? And are you going to be disappointed if they do nothing?
I mean, I'll be disappointed if they do nothing, just because I do think that they're still in need of some help. But I mean, I think my favorite answer from Donnie was his clarification of what the team considers a game-changing star or a game-changing player. I mean, the way that Mark worded it last time was, it made it sound like unless they're trading for Kawhi, they're not going to do anything. When in reality, like, what he means is a player that can help put them over the top, even if it's a rotational guy.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't have to be a superstar.
A number of different things. Yeah, they could be open to John Collins. They could be open to Rashawn Holmes. They could be open to, JJ Redd. It doesn't matter what it is. There's a guy out there that can help get them over to the top or make them significantly better without disrupting what's going on. They're going to do it, and I like the way that sounds.
One thing I'm interested in, and it came up today on Twitter, but we've talked about Lonzo Ball a little bit in the past, but not much. I think he'd fit in with this team really well. He's an excellent defender. He's a much improved 3-point shooter. His dad isn't really in the picture anymore, so that's not an issue. And I saw a thing where it was like, it said the Pelicans might, the Lonzo Ball might be the reward for a team willing to take on Eric Bledsoe or Steven Adams. And Steven Adams, that would be a tough one to make work, just because he's making $27 million this year. And then you'd add that to Lonzo making $11 million. And I mean, it'd be hard to make that work financially. But next year, Steven Adams will make $17 million a year. It decreases. So either him or Bledsoe, I mean, I'd be fine with any one of those options if the Mavs could make it work, because then you get a young key, another cornerstone piece that could potentially blossom into a third star. And then you get some help around the edges, like Donnie was talking about, whether that be Steven Adams in the front court or Eric Bledsoe and his defensive abilities, as a backup guard or something like that. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I like it. I love Steven Adams. I think he's something that the Mavs could really use, obviously. I mean, he's very tough. He can rebound. He can block shots. I just wonder what that package would look like. I don't know if the Mavs have the ammo to pull that off financially.
If they do it with Adams, it would almost certainly have to have Tim Hardaway Jr. in it, and I don't know if they do that or not.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would do that or not, because as streaky as Tim is, when he's on, he's the second best, or not second best, he's the third best offensive player on the team, and he's very important.
Right.
But to get a guy like Lonzo who can defend on the perimeter and do different things, and to get a guy like Adams, I mean, it would be very tough to say no to that as well. It's hard to say.
Yeah. And then Rashawn Holmes, a guy you mentioned, I mean, if he can be had from Sacramento, if they're not going to pay him this offseason, that would be a huge get, because he's a big energy guy, and the Mavs, I mean, they could pay him a decent amount this offseason if they wanted to keep him. I think that would be a huge help for KP, getting some rebounds and just a high energy guy blocking shots. I read a thing earlier that he is holding opponents to like 9% less at the rim than what play, like on average from what players normally score at the rim. So that would be a big get too. But I don't know, man. It's going to be fun. We've got how many hours do we have? We got about 20 hours left until the deadline. We'll see what they do. I mean, I'm going to be
2 p.m. Central Time tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. 2 p.m. Central. I'm not going to be disappointed if they don't do anything, as long as they do something with James Johnson's expiring. We'll see what they do. I just feel like they have to utilize that expiring, because DeLon Wright, as much as we've had our issues with him and everything, him being inconsistent and all that, he was the Mavs' featured move of the 2019 offseason, and they unloaded that contract to get James Johnson's expiring in here. So if he's not going to have consistent playing time, I just feel like they have to turn that into something, Matt. But we'll see what they do. Well, we got a little bit of time left, and hopefully they'll make everybody happy. But if not, we still have Mavs basketball to watch, and they're on the rise, and I think they have a real shot of getting into that top 4 in the West. So
I think it would be a huge waste of an asset to not move that contract at the deadline.
Yeah. I mean, even if they, like, I see Victor Oladipo, Woj just tweeted that he's in trade talks on several fronts, and I don't think his value is near what the Rockets think it is. So I could see that being a deadline deal where the Mavs could get a guy like him for next to nothing, because I don't think him being an unrestricted free agent and the injury issues and all that stuff, I think he'll definitely get traded, and the Mavs have a chance there. So, all right, Matt, another one's in the books. Guys, we appreciate you coming in and listening to another episode of the Mavs Step Back Podcast. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe on all your favorite platforms. And follow us on YouTube, because we are less than 90 subscribers away from 1,000. And as soon as we get there, one of you guys is going to win 2 tickets to the Mavs game of your choice. So be sure to do that. We appreciate y'all coming in and listening every single week. We're going to do a live locker room later this week as well. So be on the lookout for that. But we'll see you next time, guys. Y'all have a good one.
Let me step back for a minute. Let me step back for a minute. Let me step back for a minute. Let me step back for a minute.